Greetings and salutations, fellow pilots. This is Akirishin. By request, in this video, I will be featuring the Focke Wulf FW-190D Multirole Fighter, a German aircraft. It is equipped with two 13mm machine guns that do 49 damage per second with a very high rate of fire of 700 rounds per minute and an effective firing range of 500 meters, which would be about a low-medium effective firing range. The FW-190D is also equipped with two 30mm cannons, each of which do 95 damage per second, have a medium rate of fire of 400 rounds per minute, and a very good effective firing range of 780 meters. And we'll talk more about that particular effective firing range later. The aircraft is also equipped with two 30mm cannons, which do 180 damage per second with a low rate of fire of 240 rounds per minute and a solid medium effective firing range of 576 meters. So I would point out first that that combination of machine guns and different levels of cannons is an excellent combination. I have found the armaments on this aircraft to be very effective, and I've been very pleased with their performance. Now, in terms of bombs and rockets, it has bombs and rockets, but they're not really anything to write home about. They'll take out maybe one, possibly two ground targets, but that's it. And specifically, it has two rockets, each of which do 1,800 damage within a 55-meter radius. It also has one bomb that does 4,400 damage in a 75-meter radius. Now, the 75-meter radius is good, but the 4,400 damage, it's marginal. So, in terms of this aircraft being any type of, great ground attack, any type of great ground attack platform, it doesn't. But it's better than not having any at all, I suppose. And the other thing is that I have gotten many a kill using the rockets. So when enemy aircraft fly straight at you head on, it's nice to give them that little rocket surprise. So that's always very satisfying. Alright, so this aircraft's strengths and weaknesses. Let's talk about that. First off, a strength, in fact one of the strengths of this aircraft, is its high airspeed and a long-lasting boost. The boost on this aircraft is 20 seconds, and the high speed and the long boost on this aircraft are very important both offensively and especially defensively. The FW-190D just stinks at turning. and it's stated right in the description that it has low effectiveness in maneuvering combat, and I can tell you that that's absolutely true. This is not, by any stretch of the imagination, a turn and burn multi-role fighter, if there is such a thing. So, what is your strategy then in this aircraft? Because the current meta, if you will, is the turn and burn aircraft. At least that's what many people, perceive. So how do you fight with this aircraft in that environment? And it's really a matter of being strategic and not knowing this aircraft's limitations and not going beyond those limitations unless the circumstances are in your favor. So what you want to do with this aircraft is to keep, and again, it depends on what type of aircraft you're dealing with. Let's say you have a lone turn and burn fighter that you see as you approach. How do you deal with that fighter? Well, because it is a turn and burn fighter, you do not want to get in close proximity to that fighter, because if you do, you are going to lose that engagement unless you just absolutely take it out on the first run, which is, often not possible. So one of the benefits of this aircraft, and we'll go back here to the 20 millimeter cannons, they have a 780 meter effective firing range, which means that you can engage enemy aircraft from pretty far out. And so that turn and burn fighter, you want to keep your distance from it. Try to knock it out as quickly as possible. Choose your approach. If you can come from behind, that's best. And if it looks like the turn and burn aircraft is going to be able to start closing in on you, if you're not 100% confident that you're going to take it out before it gets close to you, then retreat. Use your aircraft's speed, and you want to save your boost. Okay, that's very important. It's a 20-second boost. And, sometimes when you're approaching sectors or a target, you want to try to use your boost to get in fast. Make sure that you save enough boost, I would say at least 15 of the 20 seconds, to be able to get out of, the area if you need to retreat. And use that speed to get away. And then once you've got sufficient distance, flip over, preferably vertically, vertical flip, and re-engage again in circumstances more favorable to you, and just rinse and repeat. Okay? But don't let that turn and burn aircraft get in close proximity to you. Now, if you come across a, let's say you're approaching the airfield in the middle of the map. Now, you know that is going to be a hotbed of combat, and there's probably going to be a large melee of aircraft going on. You don't want to get in the middle of that. Don't fly in there like John Wayne, guns a-blazing, damn the defiant kind of thing, okay? Rather, what you want to do is you want to work the peripheral of the battle. You want to stay on the edges of the battle, target isolated aircraft, and just start picking them off one at a time. And if any of them, start to approach, well, then, you retreat. Use your speed to get distance, and then come back, re-engage when the circumstances are favorable to you. And, this is not an unusual strategy by any means. The Red Baron was fond of saying that, why was he so successful? Well, because he chose his moments of attack, and if it looked like he didn't have the advantage, he ran. and that's one of the top aces, ever. He ran. So it is a very valid and useful strategy. Now, if there is an aircraft that is less maneuverable to you, like say another, multi-role fighter, although you got to be careful of some of the Russian multi-role fighters, they can be very maneuverable. But your general multi-role fighter, an attack aircraft, a bomber, uh, you know, something like that does not have good maneuverability, then okay, snuggle right in there behind that aircraft and just, duke it out at close range. But don't try that with the turn and burn aircraft. So that's your strategy in a nutshell for the FW-190, how you want to go about your combat. You've got to be very strategic, and you can't ignore the weaknesses of this aircraft. So in terms of the strength of the aircraft, the high airspeed, the long-lasting boost, we want to accentuate that as much as possible. And to do that, I have equipped Engine Tuning 3, which is, increases engine power by 5%. That helps us keep up our airspeed in turns and, when we're trying to gain altitude. And also Aircraft Polish 2, which increases our top speed by 5%. Now, you may say, well, this aircraft already has high airspeed. Are you getting diminished returns with those upgrades? I would say no, because it has high airspeed, not very high airspeed. So there's definitely, it's a strength, but there's definitely room for improvement. The other thing that you want to equip, in my opinion, is improved covering, which decreases the chance of critical damage to wings and tail by 20% and increases the FW-190D's hit points by 5%. Now you might be tempted in these upgrades to equip either Lightweight Airframe 3 or Control Surface Adjustment 3, which honestly in the past I would have equipped both of those. But my thinking on this has evolved over time, and I don't think the use of those two upgrades is going to turn this from being having low effectiveness in maneuvering combat to somehow being a good maneuvering aircraft. It just isn't going to happen. So, I've made the decision that I'm going to embrace its strengths, accentuate its strengths, and go with that, rather than try to, miraculously pull this aircraft kicking and dragging into maneuverability. I just don't think it's going to be effective, and I think you'll be more effective going with its strengths than trying to deal with its weaknesses. And I know many of you probably agree with that. One choice that you could go with instead of improved covering is the gyroscopic gun sight to increase accuracy. It is sometimes difficult to hit enemy targets with these cannons, at least for me. That's one of my difficulties as a pilot that I'm always working on. Maybe you don't have that problem. Maybe you're just super good at aiming, but for me, sometimes I have difficulty with it. And again, if you're engaging some of these aircraft at long distance, it's helpful to have more accuracy. So you could go with that. I think that's a completely defensible choice over improved covering 3. In terms of pilot skills, because we want to have good synergy with our approach here, I have chosen to go with Engine Guru 1. You could also go with Engine Guru 2, and maybe Protection Expert, but for me I've gone with just Engine Guru 1, and then I have chosen to go with Marksman 1 and Marksman 2, which increases the accuracy of the aircraft and decreases dispersion of forward-firing weapons. So I have found, I tried this aircraft with Engine Guru 1 and Engine Guru 2, along with Aerodynamics Expert, and I found that I was more effective with the sighting upgrades because I just wasn't hitting the target as often as I would like to, and these pilot skills have really helped my performance in this aircraft. So for me, this is what I'm using. When I get additional skill points, I would go into Engine Guru 2, but right now I don't have the skill points. Another thing that I considered equipping at some point would be Evasive Target, which reduces damage received and chance of receiving critical damage and pilot injuries by 25% when actively maneuvering. You have to gain and maintain a high angular velocity and pitch and roll axes to activate the skill. So when you are trying to get out of dodge, maybe you're facing a heavy fighter coming in and you want to try to maneuver away from that, it's not a bad pilot skill to have. But so anyway, tinker around with that. If you do have problems, hitting the target as I do sometimes, I strongly urge you to consider those marksman skill points, because it did help me. In terms of ammunition, I have equipped universal ammunition across the board. For the machine gun, as you might expect, because of the high rate of fire, the universal ammunition has a high chance of fire, which is nice, and a medium chance of critical damage. And that's great to have those machine guns that'll start some fires, because if your target is getting out of your gun sights because it's maybe more maneuverable in your aircraft, being able to have a fire on it in the meantime until you get it back in your sights is really useful. And then for the 20 millimeter cannon, it's got equal parts chance of fire and critical damage, so it's very balanced there. For the heavier, the 30 millimeter cannon, the universal ammunition has a high chance of critical damage and maybe a medium to low chance of fire. So I think the universal ammunition is very well designed for each one of these, those particular armaments. For consumables, I have chosen to, number one, make sure that this aircraft stays mobile. It is the lifeblood of this aircraft is its speed and being able to, zoom in, escape when it needs to. And you can't do that if you have damaged wings and tail or your engine is out. Now, this aircraft is not indicated to have a particularly vulnerable engine, but I can tell you in practice, I first started out not using the engine restarter. Instead, I had chosen to go with heavy-duty control surfaces just so I had some maneuverability related, consumable that might help out in a tight situation. And I kept getting my engine knocked out. So, it ought to say that it has a vulnerable engine, because I found over and over again that was a problem. So then I equipped automatic engine restarter and it performed better. So I would highly recommend automatic engine restarter, even though it doesn't say it has a vulnerable engine. And then, of course, control surface auto trim. If you do get damage to wings and tail, it will restore that. And I equipped automatic fire extinguisher as well in case we get fires. Now, all three of these consumables are gold consumables, which means they have a 60-second cooldown, and they do activate automatically. You don't have to think about it. The situation arises and they kick in. The non-gold version of those have 90-second cooldowns and activate manually, so just be aware of that. Aircraft specifications. Get these all expanded for you here. Altitude performance. This is a medium altitude aircraft, which means that it's got 1,600 meters as its optimum altitude, which is solidly a medium altitude level. However, you know, because of some of our upgrades with the engines, it certainly can exceed that and still perform decently. Time to turn 360 degrees. Of course, this is the weakness of the aircraft, 13 seconds. Yeah, you know, not very good, but it is what it is, right? Top speed at best altitude, 695 kilometers per hour. That's excellent, right? Very good on the dive, 880 kilometers per hour, and you can use that dive to help build speed if you need to sometimes. Optimum airspeed is 448 kilometers per hour. Stall speed is 180 kilometers per hour. Stalling in this aircraft is a problem. You know, multiple occasions I've tried to, you know, I've gone down in altitude to try to deal with something, and you know, getting back can be a chore. So if you're running into that, but you still need to get higher, maybe you want to try to knock out a bomber or something, which I've done in this aircraft. You know, the best way to do it is to just do circles and slowly increase your altitude in the circle. Kind of make it more of a flat climb, a gradual climb, and you can get it done. But if you try to go straight up, this aircraft is going to stall, just the way it is. In terms of paint schemes, this is summer that you're currently looking at. This is winter. Desert. Not bad. I do wish it had the, you know, kind of light brown camo with the little darker spots. I find that to be, you know, a very attractive German paint scheme for the desert, but unfortunately this doesn't have that. Marine. So I've certainly seen better paint schemes for German aircraft, but you know, these aren't bad. I would say maybe desert is my favorite. All right, so what we are going to do now is head over to World of Warplanes website, use their compare aircraft tool, and see how this FW190D compares to its other Tier VII multi-role fighter peers. Okay, so we are here on World of Warplanes website using their compare aircraft tool, and I have lined up the various different Tier 7 multi-role fighters to compare against the FW190D. And first up, we have the premium version of the FW190, the FW190A, and then we have the Mitsubishi J4M Sinden. So let's get right into it first and look at gun armaments. And we see that the FW190A, the premium version of the FW190D, is slightly inferior in terms of gun armaments as compared to the 190D. The J4M is indicated as being significantly inferior to the 190D. So let's take a more specific look here and see why that may be. So the FW190A has two 13mm machine guns that do 49 damage each at 700 rounds per minute and with a 500 meter effective firing range. So these are basically the same machine guns as are on the FW190D. The FW190A also has two 20mm cannons which do 80 damage per second, and that is 15 damage per second less than the 20mm cannons on the 190D at 400 rounds per minute, which is the same as the 190D's 20mm cannons, and an effective firing range of 720 meters, which is 60 meters less than the effective firing range on the 190D 20mm cannons. So basically the 20 millimeter cannons on the 190A have slightly lower damage per second and slightly lower effective firing range as compared to the 20 millimeter cannons on the 190D. The 190A also has two 30 millimeter cannons that do 180 damage per second at a rate of fire of 240 rounds per minute and an effective firing range of 576 meters. Basically, those are the same 30 millimeter cannons as are on the FW-190D. So the main difference between these two aircraft in terms of armament are found in the 20 millimeter cannons. Collectively, all of the gun armaments of the FW-190D do 648 damage per second if they were to all hit a target at the same time, whereas the gun armaments on the 190A do only 618 damage per second if they were to all hit a target at the same time. So that is why there is indicated to be slight inferiority of the 190A gun armaments, as compared to the 190D gun armaments. Looking next at the J4M. The J4M has one 30 millimeter cannon. It does 200 damage per second with a rate of fire of 160 rounds per minute and an effective firing range of 580 meters. It also has two 20 millimeter cannons, and those 20 millimeter cannons do slightly more damage per second than the 20 millimeter cannons of the 190D, although they have the same rate of fire of 400 rounds per minute, but their effective firing range is 40 meters less than the effective firing range on the 190D 20 millimeter cannons. Now collectively, the cannons on the J4M do 420 damage per second if they were to all hit a target at the same time, as compared to the 648 damage per second total for if all the gun armaments on the 190D were to strike a target. So there's a significant advantage there with the 190D gun armaments as compared to the gun armaments on the J4M. All right, looking next at bombs and rockets. The bombs and rockets on the 190A and the J4M are considered, in both cases, are considered to be inferior to the bombs and rockets of the 190D. So let's see why that might be. The 190A only has one bomb, and it does 4,400 damage within a 75 meter radius, as compared to basically the same damage of the single bomb on the 190D. Where the 190D has an advantage over the 190A is that the 190D has rockets that do a total, if all were fired, of 3,600 damage. So that is why the bombs and rockets on the 190A are said to be inferior to the bombs and rockets on the 190D. Looking at the J4M, it only has bombs. It has two of them, which each do 4,400 damage within a 75 meter radius. So total, they do 8,800 damage. In comparison, the total damage of the bombs and rockets on the FW-190D do 8,000 damage. So, I mean, if you were to look at total damage, then the two bombs on the J4M collectively do more damage. But it may be that the J4M is indicated to be inferior because it only has bombs and does not have the additional rockets. In terms of survivability, the 190A, the premium FW190, has a slight hit point advantage over the 190D, and the J4M also has a slight advantage in hit points over the 190D. Top speed at best altitude, the 190A is 55 kilometers per hour slower than the 190D, whereas the J4M is 35 kilometers per hour faster than the 190D. Maximum dive speed, 190A slower than the 190D, the J4M faster by 20 kilometers per hour as compared to the 190D. Maneuverability, time to turn 360 degrees. Both the FW190s are the same. The J4M has a 1 second advantage over the FW190Ds. Rate of roll, the same for the 190s. The J4M slightly less degrees per second than the 190s. Optimum airspeed, the FW190A slower than the FW190D, the J4M slightly faster by 12 kilometers per hour. Not a huge difference. Stall speed is the same for the two FW190s, whereas the FW190s will stall sooner than the J4M. Optimum altitude, and this is a significant difference between the premium FW190 and the Tech Tree FW190. The FW190A falls short by 200 meters as compared to the FW190D, which is at 1600 meters versus the 190A's 1400 meters. The J4M has the same optimum altitude as the FW190D. Rate of climb, both the 190A and the J4M have slightly faster rates of climb. Okay, moving on next to our American competition. We have the Republic P-47N Thunderbolt, awesome aircraft, and the Chancevalt F4U-4 Corsair, and also wonderful, also a very wonderful aircraft. Looking at gun armaments, both the P-47N and the F4U are both said to be inferior as compared to the FW190D. So looking at that more specifically, the P-47N only has machine guns, and those machine guns in total damage, if they were to all strike a target at the same time, do 416 damage per second as compared to the 640 damage per second if all of the machine guns and cannons of the FW190D were to strike a target at the same time. So that is why the P-47 Thunderbolt is indicated as being inferior. In terms of the Corsair, it does have cannons. It has 4 20mm cannons that do 115 damage per second with a rate of fire of 420 rounds per minute and a very good effective firing range of 760 meters. Now, so collectively, the F4U, the Corsair, does a total of 460 damage per second, again as compared to the 648 damage per second of the FW190D. So neither one of these American aircraft measure up in terms of raw gun armament firepower as compared to the FW190D. Looking at bombs and rockets, and I fully expected this to be the case. The P-47N and the Corsair both are indicated to be superior to the 190D, the Thunderbolt being the having the greater disparity. So let's get in and take a look at this. The Thunderbolt has two 500-pound bombs that do 4,300 damage each, and it also has 10 rockets that each do 1,000 damage. Now, if you were to total up all the potential damage that the bombs and rockets on the P-47N could do collectively, they could do a total of 13,600 in damage, as compared to the 8,000 in damage that the FW-190D is capable of. So that is why the Thunderbolt is indicated as being clearly superior in terms of bombs and rockets as compared to the FW-190D. Looking at the Corsair, it has either rockets or it can be equipped with bombs. Either or, but not both. In terms of the bombs, it has two bombs, if you go with that, which do a total of 8,600 damage. So that is 600 damage greater than the collective bombs and rockets of the FW-190D. If you were to go with the rockets, there are 8 of those, and they do a total of 8,000 damage. Same damage potential as the collective bombs and rockets on the FW-190D. Moving on to hit points, the Thunderbolt and the Corsair both have greater hit points than the FW-190D. Top speed at best altitude, the Thunderbolt slightly faster, but not by any significant margin, than the FW-190D. The Corsair slightly slower, but we're only talking 5 km/h differences there, so it's not really of any consequence. Maximum dive speed, the Thunderbolt has the advantage there by 20 km/h, whereas the Corsair has a 30 km/h disadvantage as compared to the FW-190D. Average time to turn 360 degrees, the Thunderbolt and the FW-190D are the same, whereas the Corsair has a 1.9 second advantage over the FW-190D. Rate of roll, the FW-190D has a better rate of roll than either the Thunderbolt or the Corsair. Optimum airspeed, the Thunderbolt has a 21 km/h advantage in that regard over the FW-190D, whereas the FW-190D has a 43 km/h advantage over the Corsair. Stall speed, the FW-190D and the Thunderbolt will stall at the same km/h, whereas the FW-190D will stall prior to the Corsair. Optimum altitude, the same for the Thunderbolt and the FW-190D, whereas the Corsair has a 300-meter disadvantage. Rate of climb, the FW-190D climbs faster than the Thunderbolt, whereas the Corsair slightly faster on the climb than the FW-190D. Last but maybe least, hard to say, is the Yakovlev Yak-9U Multirole Fighter. Looking at gun armaments, the Yak-9U is indicated as being inferior to the FW-190D, and let's see why that is. So the Yak-9U has one 45mm cannon that does 142 damage per second with a rate of fire of 30 and an effective firing range, which is huge, of 1,049 meters. Now you could go with the 37mm cannon, which interestingly enough does more damage, but the problem there is you lose, you know, about 400 meter effective firing range, which can be, you know, that's pretty significant. So, but the 9U also has two 20 millimeter cannons, which do the same damage per second and have the same, well, slightly faster rate of fire of 20 rounds per minute faster than the 190D, but they have an effective firing range of 700 meters versus the 780 meters of the FW190D. Now, collectively, the cannons of the Yak 9U do 332 damage per second if they were to all strike at the same time, as compared to the 648 damage per second of the FW190D. So that's, you know, that's huge in terms of the FW190D being advantaged as compared to the Yak 9U. So the, you know, the Yak 9U better have some other advantages to make up for that, because it's certainly, you know, lacking in the gun armaments factor. All right, so in terms of bombs and rockets, the Yak 9U has none, so clearly the 190D has a significant advantage there. Hit points, the Yak 9U is not as sturdy as the FW190D. Top speed at best altitude, FW190D has a 30 km per hour advantage over the Yak 9U. Maximum dive speed, there's a 160 km per hour advantage for the FW190D. Now this is where the Yak 9U has a significant advantage over the FW190D, and that is in average time to turn 360 degrees. The Yak 9U has a 2.5 second advantage over the FW190D. Rate of roll, though, the FW190D has a significant advantage there of 40 degrees per second. Optimum airspeed, again, FW190D has a 132 km per hour advantage over the Yak 9U. Stall speed, the FW190D will stall prior to the Yak 9U. Optimum altitude, here's a huge advantage for the FW190D. It has a 400 meter advantage over the Yak 9U. The Yak 9U, though, does have a higher rate of climb, but then it can't climb higher. So I think it's pretty clear that the Yak 9U has a significant disadvantage in most categories over the FW190D. So I don't know, other than maneuverability, I don't know why you would choose the Yak 9U over the FW190D. Seems to be a clear choice, and you can overcome the turning advantage of the Yak 9U by just not getting that close into it if you're in the FW190D. All right, so I hope that helps you put the Focke Wulf FW190D in context with its other Tier VII multi-role peers. Okay, so having gone over my build and strategy for this aircraft, having discussed its specifications and compared it to its Tier 7 peers, let's head into a battle now and see how it actually performs. Okay, so we'll be fighting in the FW190D over the Northern Bridgehead Atonement Theater of Operation. We'll head first.
Cover your allies, hit the enemy, and we
Let
shall
him finish.
win.
We'll head first to the command center and secure it so we can get bomber flights inbound to our enemy's captured sectors that will keep their resources tied up dealing with the bombers, or help to recapture those sectors if they don't deal with the bombers. So a few points of strategy with this aircraft. It is a poorly turning aircraft, so whatever we engage, we want to try to stay at distance from it unless we're squarely behind it, and it is a less maneuverable aircraft. We do have
Pilots,
some
get ready for action. Let's go.
pretty long-range cannons available to us. If we find ourselves getting in too close to a better turning aircraft, we want to speed out and get some distance. We want to preserve our engine boost for the most dire of situations, because the ability to speed out and escape is our strongest defensive measure. Flip vertically here, which is the best way to flip these aircraft.
Stay alert, pilots. Large enemy force spotted over the airfield.
Okay, so we've secured the command center. Let our engine boost work back up. And we're going to try to work the peripheral of this combat area. Got a multi-role here, which is about the same type of maneuverability that we have. So we'll see if we can't get in here and take it out. While watching, there's a more maneuverable fighter. We'll keep an eye on it. So we had a very low health fighter there. We'll see back if we can't swing around and get it before. There we go. Fighter here.
Squadron detected. Engage them immediately.
Alright, so we've used up our air boost here. I'm a little concerned that we're in danger here, so we need to get some distance and then maybe re-engage when things are a little bit better for us. I see we've got a couple of enemy aircraft following us here. Maybe we can get over the command center here, get some help with friendly fire, and get some distance. Okay, so we're going to flip around here and see if we can't engage this. So that's what we can do once we get some distance. And that's really just how we have to deal with it. have up here? We've got a bomber, and we just don't have the energy to get up here, unfortunately. So we'll head back down and try to take out this fighter here. Ooh, the bomber's almost dead. Just get a shot on it. There we go. Alright. Okay, so we've got a ground attack aircraft working on the airfield, which it looks like they just secured, unfortunately. Killed by hot pants. Okay, so it looks like right now the enemy is getting the better
Hang
of
in
us.
there. You'll soon be cut off from support. I say again, support will
Got some
not be
bombers
available.
inbound. Need to be dealt with, so we'll head up here and see if we can't deal with them.
That's it. There's no way to break through for you now. You're on your own.
Alright, so what do we have here? We've got a heavy fighter. See if we can't take him out. I think we're past the squall line, so if we could kill him, that would be a great thing. One less human pilot.
They've almost got us.
Almost got him. One more hit. And we've got a Spitfire here that is one shot from being dead. Got him. Air defense aircraft here. Got him. And looks like a multi-roll here, causing us issues. Excellent. Still losing though, unfortunately. Let our guns cool down here.
Turn back. The enemy force is too strong.
Okay, so unfortunately a defeat for the team, but I think this aircraft performed very well. A flying Raider badge. Ace, over 20 aerial targets destroyed, so excellent there. Conqueror. Subjugator. Effective fire. And 3 chevron grade result there. So really nice to get that ace accolade. Always enjoy that. head back here and take a look at the after action report. Okay, so 4,900 damage in aerial targets, over 5,000 damage to ground targets, took one ground target out. You know, this as a ground attack component for this aircraft, it's not very strong in that role. It's got minimal ground attack capability. Over 1,200 in, or excuse me, over 12,000 in combat points there. Number one spot on the team. Our number one player on the enemy team was Behemoth. Good job there, Behemoth. With 20 kills. Alright. And we likewise had 20 kills. And over 3,100 in experience. So unfortunately a defeat for the team, but I think the FW-190D performed excellently in that combat sortie. I think you really got to see what this aircraft is capable of. Alright, so I hope you really enjoyed this video, and I think that if you have an opportunity to fly the FW-190D, that as long as you focus on this aircraft's strengths and avoid its weaknesses, that you should have great success in it.